Thank you, Mr. Rao, and thank you to all the participants for joining us today. Today's session deals with compliance for the manufacturing businesses in India, and we will deal with it in a few phases. So we'll start by trying to understand what we mean by manufacturing, what are the businesses that we are considering within the manufacturing setup. The statutory definitions for manufacturing before we go into specific aspects of the types of laws that a manufacturing business needs to consider before we get into also subsequently discuss the compliance process that a manufacturing business should keep in mind to be able to successfully deal with the various compliances that they have to work on an ongoing basis. Today I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Christopher Manoharan and Zahid Tarafdar, both of whom have been involved with compliance management, particularly in the manufacturing sector for the last several years. And therefore we felt that they would be best suited to take you through the various aspects of the business, and we'll be very happy. The session will last approximately for an hour. We'll be very happy to take any questions that you may have at the end of it. Over to you for the rest of the discussion.
Thanks, Indranil. A very good afternoon to the attendees. Today we are going to talk about what are the basic compliances which are applicable to a manufacturing business in India. And like Indranil pointed out, I'll move on to the first slide. First, we will start by discussing what do we understand by manufacturing. Now, in normal sense or normal parlance, the manufacturing is what constitutes of a value-added production of merchandise for use or sale using, of course, labor and machines or other tools, or biological processing or formulation. Now, the term may refer to a range of human activity from handicraft to high-end technology. So, these are means which lead to production or manufacturing of various commodities or products which we use in our daily lives. Now, of course, the Factories Act, which is the primary law which governs the various manufacturing processes, including registrations of licensing of the factories, its various processes. Now, it's a very old act. There have been various judicial pronouncements around what constitutes a manufacturing process, what premises or which premises may be called to fall within the definition of factories. We will now look at them. Now, there have been, like as I said, it's an old act. Now, astonishingly, few of the examples which are given below have been considered in various judgments, in various cases to fall under manufacturing process. Now, the work of composition in printing business, cooking and preparation of food in the kitchen of a hotel, or in many case laws in the canteens, statutory canteens, which are there associated with a factory, breaking up of boulders, activities of electricians, pipeline fitters, cleaners, watchmen, etc., who are engaged in a water supply scheme, commercial establishments which are receiving the products in bulk and after unpacking them are packing them as per the requirement of the various customers. Now, these activities have been considered as manufacturing process, and the premises wherefrom these activities have been carried out have been considered as factories under various judgments. Moving on to the next slide, now we focus on what do we understand. Till now we discussed what manufacturing is under normal parlance, and also we gave some judgments, talked about certain judgments where we described that what are the things which fall under the manufacturing process. Now we will look at the statutory definition as given under the Factories Act. It says that any making, altering, repairing, ornamenting, finishing, packing, oiling, washing, cleaning, breaking up, demolishing, or otherwise treating or adapting any article or substance with a view to its use, sale, transport, delivery, or disposal. These all activities get covered under the definition of manufacturing process. Under subclause 2 to section 2K, it goes on adding pumping oil, water, sewage, or any other substance. The next clause talks about generating, transforming, or transmitting power, or composing tires for types for printing by letterpress, lithography, photograph, or other similar process, or bookbinding. Construction, reconstruction, repairing, refitting, and finishing or breaking up of ships or vessels, and preserving or storing of any article in the cold storage. So all these activities get covered under manufacturing process as defined under the Factories Act. By basically the definition, it kinds of breaks up the different activities which constitutes manufacturing process, and you will very well understand that all these are, if you are say producing any product, these are all incidental or very fundamental to actually preparing the final finished product. So all these processes have been covered under the manufacturing process. And as we all know, factory has been defined as a place where any manufacturing process, with or without the help of power, of course the number of persons who are employed there may be 10 or 20, depending on whether it is with or without power, has been defined as factories under the Factories Act, under section 2M. Now let us look at, we have only put up two judicial pronouncements here. The first one was a 2015 case. We have picked up the most recent cases, interesting cases as we could. The definition of manufacturing process does not mandate that the manufacturing activity should be carried on in one building alone. So in many cases what happens is there are various buildings where different types of products, different types of sub-products or small products which actually need to be fitted together in order to create or produce the end result or the end product which I'm manufacturing. So all those premises will be considered as factories. In the next case, which is a very recent case again in 2015, the Supreme Court actually went ahead and set certain guidelines for everyone to interpret what actually constitutes into a manufacturing process. The first point which the Apex Code pointed out is the process would be treated as manufacture only if a new product known to market came into existence with original product losing its original character. Now, I'd like to point out in this case, it was a case of preparing packaged rice with ingredients like dal and other spices. Now, it was held that the end product is not leading to production of any new kind of product, because all the ingredients, whether the dal or the different spices or the rice in itself, was not losing its original quality, and the end result was not different from what the ingredients were. The second point which the Apex Code laid down in this case was mere addition in value after original product had undergone certain process would not bring it within the definition of manufacture unless its original identity also underwent transformation and it became a distinctive and a new product which could easily be separated from the ingredients, from the characteristics of the ingredients which went into manufacturing of that product. The third and the last point which was laid down in this case law was mere addition to addition would not make it different product if the primary and essential character of the product after such addition still remained same. Like the example, as I cited, the point of debate on this in this case law was the end product which was called to be a new which was called to be getting covered under the manufacturing process, or a new product getting produced. The rice, the dals and all the spices was actually challenged in this case, and it was held that there is no manufacturing process which is getting covered here, because every ingredients are retaining their actual quality even after even if you look at it as the final product. There has to be a transformation of the product into a new commodity, commercially known as a distinct and separate commodity. Moving on, we will spend I will talk about two different aspects on the basis of which you can segregate compliances. The first one is on the basis of activity. Now, as we all know, we have like there can be various bases of activities, but we have just concentrated on the primary three different aspects of activity that a business undergoes during its lifetime. The first one is start of operations. The second one is ongoing activities or ongoing compliances, and the last one is shifting or closure of operations. Now, the first one, of course, where the moment you start a business, there are various registrations, approvals, licenses, consents, permissions, which you'll have to obtain. In many cases, the licenses have to be obtained after you start operations, within, say, 30 days from the start of operations. In many cases, you will have to file for consent even before you actually dig the land. That's the commissioning. Then they come and give you the license to construct the building of factory. Later on, after you construct the building, again the inspector comes from the pollution control board or the pollution control committee, as the case may be, and then they commission the factory premises and give you a license to carry out production of your manufacturing process to produce your products. The next activity is ongoing compliances. As we all know, there are periodic filings, there are certain display requirements outside your factory showing clearly that what are the type of chemicals which you use, what is the environmental impact of those chemicals or various effluents getting used, maintenance of records and registers, be it the things which you are importing or you are using in raw material, or the times of work of your employees or workers in your factory, maintenance of policy documents, and your payment obligations. Lastly, we can talk about shifting or closure of operations. If you wish to change your location of operations from one place to another or close your operations altogether, there are certain compliances relating to sending notices to various officials. There are notices of closures which needs to be filed under the Industrial Disputes Act and many labor enactments also, where you have to notify that your operations are getting shut down. There are full and final settlements of your employees stroke workmen which need to be made. Moving on to the next slide, now we will talk about the segregation of compliances on the basis of three more aspects, which are industry, location, your employee or workman strength. Industry, we have listed down a few industries here which relate to manufacturing sector: food, pharmaceutical, cement, automobile, machinery, construction, chemical, oil and gas. Basis what type of industry you are in, what type of products you manufacture, your industry specific laws and compliances will vary. For the food industry, there is the Parent Act, Food Safety and Standards Act, as we all know. For the pharmaceutical industry, the Drugs and Cosmetics Act is the primary act which governs the industry. For the cement industry, there are various cement control orders, there are various Mines Act which comes into play. Automobile industry, as we all know, machinery, construction, chemical, oil and gas. The point that I'm trying to make out here is, basis the different type of industry you fall in, your industry specific compliances will vary and they will be absolutely specific to what kind of product you produce. The next aspect is location. Basis where you are located, your compliances will differ. There are various central act which will be clubbed with the state rules depending on which state or union territory you are operating out of. There are local legislations of state act and state rules which will come into the picture. Some examples are like the Factories Act will be clubbed with the relevant state rules in which you have your factory. The Contract Labor Act, if you are exceeding the number of contract laborers which is permissible to be employed without having to obtain a registration, as soon as you cross that threshold, it has to be clubbed with the relevant state rules. The State Shops and Establishment Act and rules for your administration offices will come into play. The Labor Welfare Funds and Act. Of course, this is just a very, very short list. The list of laws is really lengthy than what has been shown here. Depending on the third aspect is your workmen and employee strength. And depending on the number of workmen you employ, various other laws may also come into the picture, like Contract Labor Act, the example I cited, Employees Provident Fund Act, Employees State Insurance Act. Again, there are certain compliances under Factories Act which are driven by the number of workmen which you employ. We all know that if you cross 100 workmen in a factory, a statutory provision of providing canteens is given under the law. Again, if you cross a certain number of threshold, there is a requirement of keeping a welfare officer and a safety officer in your factory at all times, who has to have certain specific educational qualifications also. Not only that, there is a first aid box requirement which varies from when you exceed probably 200 or 300 workers in your factory. What the first aid box will contain, the law specifies that also if you cross a certain number of threshold. Now we will look at a just sample list of laws bifurcated into definitely applicable, may be applicable. Now this of course has been designed on the basis of our experience, which tells us that laws like Factories Act, Electricity Act, Industrial Disputes Act, Legal Metrology Act, the Air Pollution Control Act, the Water Pollution and Control of Prevention and Control of Pollution Act are definitely applicable law to any manufacturing sector. And inside the may be applicable laws, there comes the Boilers Act, the Petroleum Act, if you store petroleum products beyond a certain threshold as given under the law. If you have been following certain standards in terms of your production or any processes, then the Bureau of Indian Standards Act comes into the picture. If you have a medical facility or provide first aid to any your employees, factories is of course it's mandatory, but in case your if you have a medical facility in your office also, then the biomedical waste management rules comes into the picture. The e-waste management rules 2016 also is there, which tells you that every computer, every calculator, every electronic product which you use has to be given back to the person who is appropriate authority, or the appropriate or the organization which has taken license to handle those e-wastes properly. Motor Vehicles Act, as we all know, in order to move our products from our factory to warehouse or various sales channels, we get vehicles in the name of the company, and those licenses or those compliances under the Motor Vehicle Act then comes into the picture. Moving on, we will look at some examples of compliances which are given under the laws which we discussed till now. First, we will take up the Factories Act, which is a central act raised with the State Department. As I pointed out, the state's rules will depend on which state or union territory you are operating out of. It has several compliances like obtaining a compulsory approval, licensing, and registration of factories. Now, there are various measures on health, safety, and welfare of the workmen. The working hours, the leaves, etc. have to be regulated as per the provisions given under the Factories Act. Not only that, these leaves and the hours of work has also to be put up in the form of a notice and maintained in various registers. Now we will talk about the Shops and Establishment Act, which would be applicable to your administration offices in various states. It has compliances like the primary compliance is the registration requirement under State Shops and Establishment Act. Then it regulates, like similar to Factories Act, it regulates the working hours, the opening and closing hours, the overtimes, the leaves which you provide to your employees. There are other welfare statutes like Employees Provident Fund Act, Employees State Insurance Act, which are central acts with central rules. It mandates filing of various, of course, there are both laws demand that you get registration done and employer code taken from their online portal. Besides that, filing of statements on a monthly basis, preparation of various contribution cards, both for EPF and ESI, are also there. Talking about the penalties, now under Factories Act, a penalty may extend up to 1 lakh of rupees, or an imprisonment which may extend up to 2 years. Now, another major example of a big penalty is under Employees Provident Fund Act, where an imprisonment up to 3 months or a fine, monetary fine of up to rupees 10,000 can be taken from or can be demanded from offenders of the provisions of the Act. Besides all of these, as we all know, under the new Companies Act, Section 134, subsection 5, clause F, makes it mandatory for directors to ensure that they have devised proper systems to ensure that all compliance is applicable in the land where they're operating out of are adequately and effectively complied with. Now, what does it mean? Going a little into a deep, now devising a proper system. So the term devising the proper system should include fundamentals of designing, developing, and implementing of proper system, which would ensure ongoing monitoring of legal compliances is in place and would act as defense against any prosecution. Now, again, it tells all applicable laws. Now, how do you ensure that you are applying, you're complying with all applicable laws? Now, we'll talk about various processes as the topic of this discussion is what are the 10 easy steps which will lead you to a more compliant environment or will push you towards 100% compliance. But primarily, by all applicable compliances, we mean that applicable laws and compliances basis your operation. Certainly, if I am producing cement, Food Safety and Standards Act wouldn't be industry-specific law for me. So and I'll be talking about it at length in my following slides. So the landscaping of compliance is understanding what my regulatory environment is right at the word go is very important. I need to understand what activities I do and therefore which are the laws and compliances thereunder which apply to me. Now, having adequate systems in place. What does this term mean? This would, now naturally it would basically mean having a legal compliance system or various programs. Now, employee-driven program, it can be a training program, it can be other programs, which covers all your legal entities, business divisions, departments to ensure that people are knowledgeable about the various compliances which apply to them and they take due care in complying with them. Moving on, we will just, many of us, as we know, there is this small factories regulation of employment and condition of services law, which is hovering at the corner. So we'll just talk about what are the salient features which brings about. This law seeks to consolidate on 14 laws into one. This, of course, targeted towards small factory. It consolidates 14 different laws into one, which are Factories Act, the Industrial Disputes Act, the Standard Orders Act, the Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Wages Act, Payment of Bonus Act, ESI, EPF, Maternity Benefit, Employees Compensation, Interstate Migrant Workmen Act, the State Shops and Establishment Act, the Equal Remuneration Act, and Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation of Employment Act. Besides that, this law seeks to exclude persons from who are performing administrating and supervisory or managerial functions within the definition of workmen. It is excluding it. It hopes to make payment of wages within a seventh of every succeeding month. Electronic deposit of wages in the bank account of the worker is something which this law talks about. It talks about also tracking attendance and late coming of workers to factories. It has provisions to provide mandatory insurance for all workers in your factory and registers. It provides the option of maintaining registers in either hard or soft form, as we all are experiencing more as the day with every passing day. Gradually, we are moving towards more technological advancement, and it's becoming more painstaking as we with every passing day to maintain all these records and registers in hard form. In the next slide, we are talking about how can compliance be driven by leadership of a company? Now, this is very critical because since we are in the business of providing compliance solutions to various clients, we have noticed this over the years. Now, a call by the leadership, a stance taken by the leadership towards their path, for their paths for walking towards compliance is very important in how the future of any entity, be it in the manufacturing sector or the service sector, will shape up. Now, does your company wish to be compliant? Now, if the answer is a yes, we have eventually through these many years found out that it's a step towards building positive reputation. It's a step towards higher productivity in the company. And we'll talk about why I'm telling this. It's a step towards avoiding of unnecessary, uncalled for statutory hassles. And if, as we have found especially with the less regulated SME sector, where people have said that it's not really time for them to concentrate or worry about compliances. What it actually does, we've found out, is it affects your reputation as a company. It adversely affects your business opportunities. Many companies, big companies, especially international companies, prior to giving you business, would want to see what are the internal policies, internal processes which you have in place to abide by the laws of the country. And if you have nothing to show at that point in time, it might result in losing that business opportunity. It will most certainly discourage investors, because one of the things which the investors seek from various entities before investing their very precious money is your compliance certificates. Again, those policies and processes come into place, which should be there from the start of your operations. Now, if you're saying no to compliance, you are also exposing your business to unpredictability in terms of we have ample examples. I'll not go into that. We've seen that in the past, not giving notice of closure or not giving notice in case of while laying out workmen or calling a strike has led to shutting down of operations in many cases. So those unpredictability unpredictability of events is a chance, is a risk which you are taking by saying no to compliances. So leadership and compliance basically by the board of direct has to be driven by the board of directors and senior management, where one has to set the tone in an organization for becoming a compliant organization right from the beginning. Now we will move on to the various steps, various 10 steps which we think has to be complied with or has to be followed in order to ensure that all compliances which are applicable to a manufacturing sector will be met. The first one is creating effective compliance management system in your organization. How do you do that? We'll have to first create appropriate structures, reporting mechanisms where we set up ownership among various stakeholders or give ownership to various personnels within your organization. Make them responsible by adding another layer of reviewing, another level of reviewers at the top, which can be your departmental head or the operating head or your factory manager or the board of directors. An effective compliance management system always mitigates the adverse impacts on achieving objectives. This, of course, can be done for the various by various ways, like you'll have to educate your personnel about compliance responsibilities. You'll have to ensure that employees understand their responsibilities, ensure that the requirements are incorporated into business processes, review operations to ensure responsibilities are carried out and requirements are met. The next step would be a gap analysis. So it will be very unlikely that a person who is starting off a business, especially a manufacturing sector, do not know about the Factories Act licensing, do not know about the requirement to obtain a boiler's registration if they are planning to put up a boiler, have not obtained registrations like basic registrations like EPF, ESI. So where we fail as an organization is knowing your landscape completely, thoroughly. So that brings in my next point of as a step towards being compliant is gap analysis. You will have to carry out a gap analysis of your existing processes which you follow, the compliances which you follow now, and then you will be able to tell that what are the things are in place and what are the things which you are missing out, what are the additional things you must take into account. In case you do not have a system in place, then you need to understand the nature of your business operation and identify the laws applicable. The third thing which I pointed out in the beginning also, I talked about in the beginning also, is compliance landscaping. Identifying the applicable statutes to your company and organization. Detect if any exemption. Another important point is we know that there are these special economic zones which have been set up. So if you have your factory or any warehouse or any operating unit located in these SEZs which are spread across the country, you get certain exemptions, especially the fiscal compliances which are applicable to you, which exemptions which are applicable to you. The next is we always talk about policies, and it's the best way which we believe is to make your employees or workmen be knowledgeable about the various companies. Now, while drafting the policies, you will have to think statutory provisions like prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. What does the law say? What are the things which you must abide by to ensure that there is no sexual harassment at your workplace? Those should be included as part of the policy. What are your waste management and disposal policies should be in line with the various waste management laws. There are certain new laws which have come into the picture. The maternity benefit which is given under the law. There are certain amendments which have come into the picture recently. So not only that, not only will you have to add those statutory provisions or requirements into your policy, you will also need to make sure that they are updated as and when the law gets changed. Your leave policy, again, if it's a factory, there are various number of leaves which you need to follow. If it's your establishment or office, your leave policy will have to be accordingly modified. Your IT policy, especially with regard to personal and sensitive information, how do you handle them? What are the ethics which you are building in your organization? How do people treat information which come via email? Those things have to be incorporated in the policy, looking at the relevant provisions which are given under the Information Technology Act and the various rules framed thereunder. Now, the sixth thing, which is your company ethics. This is very important because when an employee or a workman joins your organization, you will have to imbibe the feeling of compliance, that this is a compliant organization which they have joined, in the policy itself, and all other aspects of your policy you will have to marry with the different legal provisions which are there. The next step, important step towards becoming a compliant organization is training and education. Be it HR, be it, I'm sure in the manufacturing sector, the moment a production process undergoes a change, there are various levels of training which happen inside the organization, starting from the fitter, starting from the person who brings the goods, starting from the person who works on the conveyor belts. They are all trained because there is a need, since the manufacturing process has changed. There was the raw materials, how will they come in now, how they used to come in earlier, it differs, and therefore this training and education finds a lot of importance when it comes to manufacturing process. Now, when it comes to compliance, training and education is of equal importance. It is especially with aspects of when a person can take leave. how many days in advance that person has to apply. If it's a privileged leave, what is the minimum number of days before which minimum number of days a person should have worked in the organization before which he or she can apply for a privileged leave? What are the grounds on which a casual leave may be given? So that your employees know this entire thing properly, and accordingly they can apply for leave. And why do you need this? So that while they apply for leave, you can accordingly fill up your all registers, whether in soft form in case you have obtained an exemption from the relevant authority to maintain documents in soft form. You can accordingly fill up your registers which you maintain in the organization. Now, there should be a proper system in place to educate the employees about the organization's compliance program and its policies and the way company handles compliance management. If there is a non-compliance issue, if there is a certain unwanted outbreak of fire, what does a person do? How does your people react? I know that many of us, all of us, in fact, in today's day and age, we put up signs like do not use the lift in case of fire, do not panic, use the staircase in case of the lift. All of that is fine. But do we also remember there is a notice which needs to be sent to the fire marshal or the fire safety officer? So what does a person do? Does your employees, do your workmen are trained for that information? What are the notices which needs to be so these are the things, keeping in mind that there are various contingencies which may occur. The training and education part with regard to compliances become very important. Legal mandate should be explained to the employees properly so that they are aware of their obligations as well as the procedure to execute them. We talked about prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. The law clearly defines what are the various gestures, what are the various things which may amount to sexual harassment, which may amount to sexually harassing a colleague. Does your employees know all of them? Does your employees know what to talk while a lady is around? So those questions need to be answered, and only when you have a proper training and a proper checklist which has been handed over to all your employees or workmen will they come to know that these are the things they should not do in a work environment and how to behave with colleagues. The sixth point is allocation of duties. Now, we've seen this happen. We all know that the larger the organization is, there is more delegation of power. You will have to hand over authority to people and train them with the spirit of your company so that they take things like not only your production process, not only your human resource process, your compliance also seriously. All compliance activities have to be segregated and allocated department-wise. We usually have, this is again from our experience, every company more or less has a human resource management department. Every company has a finance or fiscal department. Labor and employment related laws can go to your HR resource management department. The fiscal compliances, the corporate compliances, fiscal compliances can go to your finance department. The corporate compliances can go to your company secretariat department. So accordingly, you need to segregate the compliance requirements to your various departments. Inside that departments, you will have to identify the persons who will have to comply with them in the first place, and people sitting at the top like departmental head or any director or any manager or any factory manager who will review them to make sure that compliances have been not only being met but have been completed appropriately in the way they should have been. The company should have an effective mechanism in place to review and keep a check on the compliance activities done by the personnel to whom it was allocated, and the same should be done before the due date of the compliances arrive. The points which we discussed. Now, moving on, the seventh point is we are talking about a plan. For what? For handling contingent events. I briefly talked about the outbreak of a fire. There are things like a person, a director resigning from a board, or a director joining your board. There are other contingent events which are waiting to happen anytime. Some are within your control, some are outside your control. What do you do in those cases? You will have to plan out all your contingencies which have a likelihood of happening sometime in the future and have proper response teams to ensure that all notices, all compliance requirements in the event that such contingency happens are taken care of. All the compliance activities revolving around contingent events that is to be carried out in a particular year needs to be assessed beforehand. A review of whether the contingency has occurred has to be conducted as frequently as one apprehends the contingent event to occur. The next point is documentation and preservation of record. Now, every law we talked about till now has an obligation upon you to keep all the documents, all the registrations, all the permits which you have obtained with you for a particular period, so that in case an inspector or an authority, someone, a representative from the authority comes at your place and wants to do an audit of whether to look at your filings which you have done for the year 14-15, you can show them to them. Every law has a prescribed period for which it has prescribed what are the documents which have to be preserved by you, and B, for what period. The ninth point which we will talk about is ongoing compliance monitoring. Now, periodical audit of operating units. By ongoing compliances, we ensure, again, in the manufacturing sector, we very well know of compliances like keeping your factory premises free from any effluents or smoke, ensuring that your canteen utensils are always clean and safe to be eaten food with. Now, these are the things which usually falls through the gap. Putting up of notices in your premises, ensuring that all registers are kept in proper place, ensuring that the visit books are signed whenever the inspector comes and visits your premises. You ensure that you also sign in front of that visiting inspector. So those are ongoing compliances that we will talk about. These need periodical audits of all your operating units, whether they are getting complied with properly or not. The discussions with stakeholder on gaps which have been observed. Correction of those gaps basis the different steps which you take, basis the policies which you have, basis the corrective action methods which you have incorporated in your system. Report generation to top management and board directors. The last point which we will talk about is having a center of excellence. Again, how? By making people who are knowledgeable about compliances, who know about what are the company policies and what are the different compliances it need to adhere on a day-to-day basis. Those persons can sit right at the top to ensure that all your compliances are maintained, and through various channels, various departmental heads. You need to continually monitor and identify non-compliances so that they are corrected the next time. Ensure that these non-compliances do not recur by augmenting or creating new policies and procedures, which also includes changing your existing procedures. As we talked about a little while ago, law is ever dynamic and it keeps changing. You need to change your policies and procedures to keep it in tune with the existing legal provisions. Training and creating awareness across various teams on processes being followed to ensure compliance. These three topics can be the primary responsibilities of the center of excellence, or the body which you may form. You may call it by whatever name you feel like, but you must have a group of people who are the main stakeholders when it comes to internal compliances, whom you can walk up to get a clarification on what the compliance status across your various operating unit or departments are. So, if we sum up by saying that the key actions that a board and management of a manufacturing sector may take to demonstrate their commitment to maintaining an effective compliance management system is to first to set up a positive climate for compliance, which includes things like by demonstrating clear and unequivocal expectations about compliances, adopting clear policy statements, now allocating resources to compliance functions with the level of complexity of the institution's operations, conducting periodic compliance audits. We also talked about having a gap analysis, a timely gap analysis to ensure that all compliances which you have incorporated in your policy are actually all that you need to comply with. Providing for recurrent reports by compliance officer to the board or maybe to the department head also. As you may know, we have at Lexplosion, we have come up with a tool which is called Amplify, an easy to onboard tool which has many features. Like it should take 10 to 15 minutes for anyone with some basic information to be filled in to the tool. In order to get ongoing, it gives you all your compliances by modules, all your critical compliances in one place. You can set up systems by allocating tasks and various hierarchies and reports. How it helps is we touched upon things like identify your laws, knowing your compliance regulatory landscape. Amplify does that for you. It manages, it helps you to manage your compliances. It sends automated ahead of time alerts to ensure that you are compliant every time. It does a management by exception, as in you can create customized report through Amplify and send them to your reporting managers to say that to ensure to certify that you have been complying with what are the different compliances which have been given to you. So we are through with this. Mr. Rao, if you could kindly intervene, and we'll be happy to take any questions which the audience might have.